we'll dive into the early part of the game. What we had kind of talked about happened early on. Nebraska came out and was aggressive, and USC countered that. Me and you were kind of texting throughout the game more than we usually would, and
it shows the intensity of this game.
Yes, and USC was very much, and in this one I was paying a lot more attention to the football than I would normally do, because I was curious to see this chess match take place. Because Lincoln Riley, being as great of an offensive mind as he is, and I know a lot of USC fans are not 100% in agreement with that, but he is a really good offensive mind. At times, he was a little bit too creative for his own offense, and that led to them having penalties, et cetera, et cetera. But Nebraska came out with exactly the intention that we thought they would. They came out aggressive, wanting to stop the run game. And although they didn't do it, they came out with the aggression. And what the aggression made USC do is the aggression was also there in the pass game. And that made them have to make some kind of, changes to back our defense off, because we were doing a good job of mixing up man versus zone. So what USC started doing on offense is they started kind of motioning around and seeing what we were in. And then I think it was after that first drive, we came out and we stopped them pretty early. Sorry if I'm having a hard time talking. I had this bump that's in my lip for some reason, so it's making it a little hard to talk. So I apologize about that.
I have Zins in right now, so
I just have this little bump in my lip, and I don't know what it is. But it's some kind of swollen salivary gland under my lip or something like that. I don't know. I just Googled it, and it's cancer. I'm dying. But they were motioning around, and what you saw was on the second offensive drive for USC, they motioned. They saw we were in zone, and they took that pass onto the right side, dropped it over our zone coverage, and then from there, you saw our defensive backs have to back off a bit. And what that did was that opened up the run game again, because we came out early and we were aggressive in stopping the run. But as soon as they came out and dropped that little pass over our zone coverage, our defender forced our DBs to kind of back off a little bit. And that made USC get a little bit of momentum, because then they could just kind of, Mayava got a little bit, I wouldn't say comfortable. He was never felt comfortable in the pocket, but on that second drive, he got more comfortable than he was on that first drive, because at that point, he at least kind of had an idea of what we were running defensively coverage wise.
Mm-hmm.
And, they run that counter play very effectively. We knew going into it, it's one of those things that USC runs that they run that counter tray, and and we knew they were they dare you to stop it, essentially, because they block that so well. But the thing is, they set it up well, and if it's not there, they use that opportunity there to kind of they'll make it work. They'll make your defense have to adjust to what they're doing, so then they can run it. So when they're using that motion, it's kind of for information. And anybody who's played a Madden game or anything like that, when you motion a guy across, you check if the defense is man or zone. It's very similar to that, right? And they watch how the defense reacts, and if the defense travels with the motion, it's man, vice versa. You can look at the eyes of the DB, try to find out. And then second half, we adjust a little bit, which we'll get into. But just talking about early on in the game, so USC went to kind of some zone beater concepts, and then to counter tray. But what that does is it makes you have to back off your aggression. It loosens the defense up. So they started running some curl flats, some spacing routes, some flood concepts to force Nebraska's kind of linebackers, nickels, to kind of get a little bit more horizontal. With the floods, they have that kind of that 3-level stretch up the field with deep corner, intermediate, and they have a flat, curl flat. You have that isolates the curl zone defenders. And then you have your short sit routes that attack like the soft spot in the zone. Then they were doing a very good job of mixing those things up, and that makes the linebackers a little bit more hesitant to drive downhill, and the secondary guys a little bit more hesitant to drive downhill. As soon as they started to like nearly break those runs, our DBs then had to back off. And so the way they run this, they have the backside, and they kind of showed it a couple times with the backside guard and tackle pull. Guard kicks out the in-man, tackle wraps up, and kind of grabs that linebacker or defensive back, whatever it's going to be, whether it's play side, defensive backwards, play side linebacker, whatever. And then the running back takes that counter step away from the direction. And even though it's going to get you, like, they have good enough tight ends and H-backs. We talked about this with their tight ends being so versatile that they have such good tight ends that when they're on the field, you don't know whether they're there to block or run out in a route because they can do both. And that's what makes this such a good play for them. And so with Nebraska, they have to be quick and flow fast. But the thing about it is if you're over aggressive, the pullers come around, they seal that over pursuit, and then the running back cuts back and they kick it open. So it's perfect to kind of slow down the momentum of your aggressive defense. And we got Ken hopping in here from Gen Red. What's up, Ken? He's going to get his stuff set up. So let me pull this down real quick.
Oh, I was at the same time as you.
You can get your stuff set up as you go through it. We can't hear you.
You saw that happen earlier or later in the game where Nebraska started over pursuing on that counter, and then they just busted it back. He completely went the opposite direction. Like, it was extreme, and they busted a big run down the right sideline, I believe it was, because they over pursued. And then I think part of because Nebraska was defending that play relatively, I wouldn't say great, but they were relatively consistently early.
Yes.
And then later on in the game is when the second quarter is when they started having more success with it. And I noticed Williams Nwarni, as good as he can be, he tends to line up and rush what he thinks is going to be a pass rush situation. He tends to line up further away, further off the ball.
Yeah.
Which then causes him to get way upfield, and then they just run right underneath it. It was the same problem with James Williams last year, except Williams Nwarni is about 10 times the athlete.
Yeah, that's interesting. I might have to actually check that out. Can you hear us, Ken?
Yeah, man, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Appreciate you hopping on, man, even after the tough loss.
The debacle, as it
were. How you feeling?
I'm feeling, let's just say, resigned to the fact that the 6-3 team that we are now very well could be 6-6 if these lines of scrimmage continue to play the way they're playing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of good to take away. I mean, if you would have told us that Raiola got hurt in the third quarter coming into this week and we lost by 5, I probably would have called you a liar, to be completely honest with you.
I'll add, you had the ball with a chance to go win it, and your running back stumbled on a 4th and 1, which he was going to get. He was getting at least 4 or 5 on that play because he was about to cut it back if he doesn't stumble.
What a poetic way to end it,
It's like the most Nebraska thing ever.
So we're talking about a little bit. So whenever we would line up whenever they'll line up in a man baiting pass look, 3-by-1 or trips, like they'd kind of have their bunch spacing outside, and then they'd if a DB follows, they'd stay with the man beater. And then I kind of texted Brian during one of their, I think it was their second drive or the third drive or something like that, whatever drive they scored that first touchdown on. And I kind of was telling them, that they're using that motion. Then it's, a couple plays later, they motion, and then you see Jaden Mayava check so what they had was, we were in man. They came out with a man beating concept, and then they came out with a zone beating concept, and they checked as soon as they had that motion, and then they switched over the run that kind of beat our man coverage. And so at that point, it became a coaching battle. And Nebraska was doing a very good job of holding their own. And we'll get to the offensive side of the ball here in a little bit, but they were, if it's man, they were throwing their route concept of zone. They run the counter tray right into the softness of the box. And that was why we were kind of like going in this week. We were like, we have to stack the box as much as possible in this game and dare them to beat us with their arm. And we still couldn't stop the run. That's the unfortunate part of this, is the fact that if we had interior defensive line, a lot of this would have been a lot easier for us, because then we wouldn't have had to back off our secondary to counteract the fact that, hey, they are about to break these runs because the middle of our defense can't get these stops.
Yeah, they averaged 5.3 yards per attempt tonight. And that's including the 2 sacks we had. So that's probably realistically closer to 6.